Hello everyone and welcome. I wanted to talk a bit about social spaces in museums and heritage sites today because they can be really important and they can be really interesting to have a look at, because very often people tend to gather or linger in spaces that we didn't really think they would. It might not necessarily be at cafes or in sitting areas that people sort of stay for longer than they really have to, and it can be really useful to have a look at why are some places more attractive for visitors to stay in, either to socialize in or for reflecting or for engaging somehow. So I thought, let's have a look at what is actually social spaces, have a look at some examples, why are they important, and also how can we as museum and heritage sites actually work with these spaces and create better experiences and make them work to our advantage. As always, remember to like the videos, subscribe to the channel and add your comments. First of all, what is actually a social space? Well, they are places where people naturally gather. They are places where people interact, where they relax, they hang out, they let their guards down. And when we say social spaces, it's not necessarily spaces where people, well, socialize. It can also be spaces where you just want to hang out, where you just want to reflect and be yourself. So places where people want to sit or be for longer than they naturally have to. And that can be for themselves or together, but it happens in a space where there are other people present, where we can all sort of be together, and where, well, you know, that's public access really. The reason why these spaces can be quite important for museum and heritage sites are because we know that when people let their guard down, they become more receptive. They become more open for experiences, for emotions and for storytelling. So when situations become informal, and they therefore also become more relaxed, and we know this from, for example, learning situations, when you have your sort of learning perspective on, you become receptive for formal learning. However, the informal storytelling and emotional storytelling, we tend to shut off a little bit, whereas in emotional environments, we simply become more open for that. You also sort of have your own place or role in a social space, and we will have a look at some examples in a minute for how this can be, but there is a space for you there, and that's also one of the reasons why you feel like it's nice and comfortable to stay in this space. You also become more open for socializing with people that you don't know, so simply starting a conversation or an activity with people who happen to be there at the same time as you. You also provide people with a physical and a mental space to reflect and to form opinions, perhaps about an experience they have just had in your galleries or in your heritage site, and it gives them an opportunity of framing that experience within the place. So not when they have left or when they have gone back home again, but at the actual space where this is happening. Now, just to have a look at a few examples. This first picture is a little bit of a dark one, but I hope you can see what's going on anyway. It's from the Science Museum in London, where you have people sitting, some children on the floor there in front of this huge globe, and some adults sitting on benches and so on, and they're listening to stories being told, and this huge light bright globe become the sort of focus point for these stories, and people come and go, and there are lots of exhibitions and displays happening around this, but this is quite an attractive centerpiece if you want people together, and mixed with sounds and lights, that can be quite powerful. Now, you can also actually create spaces where you want this to happen, but bear in mind, this might not mean that people actually want to hang out there, but this is an example from the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh on one of their top floors, where they have created an activity space or room with lots of activities for children. You can draw, you can do digital interactives, you can play games, and you can see children of all ages there sitting, and a very active, sometimes noisy space, but clearly a space where that's meant for activities, that's meant for exploring, that's meant for playing, that's meant for being together. And you can engage in activities on your own, or you can do it with people you're with, or indeed with people who are there you don't know yet. There are also another type of social spaces, which is those where you sort of naturally gather or come in. This is a well-known example from the Natural History Museum in London, in the huge hall where you have people coming and going all the time. This is a natural meeting space. If you lose each other in a huge museum, you can meet here when you are in between galleries and you have to decide, do we want to go and see this one now or that one, or should we go to the cafe, or should we go to the shop, or what do we do from here? This is a brilliant space to have that conversation in. And people walking out, up and down the stairs, people coming in and out of various galleries. And you also have this huge natural focus point in the shape of the blue whale skeleton, so a huge object there to attract attention as well. So you are never in doubt when you are back in this space. If you lose your way, you will know when you are back in this space because it's very recognizable. Another way of creating this space is also by letting people engaging with the storytelling. So this is an example from Banqueting House, where they have these bean bags where people can lie down and have a look at this beautiful ceiling. And this is part of the storytelling. So you can see people lying there listening to the audio guide. And actually there is a practical perspective in this as well, because looking up all the time and having your neck back can actually be quite hard. So you simply see more and experience more if there is a space for you to actually do this in a relaxed and comfortable way. Now, as you can see, this is not a setup that naturally encourages sort of social engagement. So people are not necessarily talking to each other, but they are engaging with the experience with other people, and yet on their own, depending on where they are in the audio guide and what they're listening to there and what they're looking at in this very moment. So that's another way of creating a space where people can gather and will stay for a moment and engage in a specific story or a specific object. Now, a few questions to consider when it comes to creating and also identifying these social spaces, because as I said, it might not be where you think that people naturally gather that they also stay and gather. Even though you might have gone out of your way to try and create a space for people to gather, they might not naturally do that. So first of all, have a look at where do people actually gather? Where do they linger? Where do they stay for longer than they have to? Then have a look at why is the atmosphere nice here? What is actually creating the atmosphere? Is it an object, like we saw in some of the examples, that's very attractive or a natural focus point? Is it the room itself? Is it a feeling or an atmosphere in this room or space? Is it an activity perhaps that makes you want to stay longer? Is it members of staff doing something that makes you want to stay longer? What is creating a nice atmosphere for gathering, for sitting, for engaging? Also look at why do people want to hang out here? What are they actually doing? Are they watching something? Are they sitting? Are they relaxing? Are they talking? Are they engaging? Are they reflecting? Are they socializing? What are they doing? Are they interacting? Are they participating? Now, a brilliant example also from the National Museum of Edinburgh was when they had this huge aquarium with lots of fish in it, and especially children could stand there forever and have a look at the fish swimming around. And this is just another example of what can actually create a sense of sociability and a sense of you wanting to be there. Now have a look at how can you enhance the sociability or the atmosphere in this place. What can you do to help visitors reflect upon a story, maybe not in the space, but a story they might have just experienced or engaged in, for example, your galleries. What can help them and encourage the sociability, the reflection and the atmosphere, and therefore the experiences for them? But also the opposite. What would spoil this or destroy the atmosphere in the space? Now, it is amazing actually how often we tend to do this by mistake, because we have often pinpoint a certain space in our galleries or in our museums where we want to do something or create a certain activity, and without really realizing it, we end up spoiling a social space by putting lots of stuff in it or trying to turn it into something that it isn't, and we end up working against the atmosphere and the sociability in that space. So that's actually surprisingly easy to do. So also have a think about what would spoil this? What should we not do in this space? And the difficult thing here, the tricky bit, is that sometimes people stay and linger in spaces that you would actually like to make or create a different use for, and sometimes they don't stay in the spaces where you thought they would, and you might have created sitting areas or try to create a lovely atmosphere here, and yet they don't stay there. So really dive into, have a look at what makes people stay. Why are they staying here? Where in your journey of experiences do this place pop up? Is it a timing thing as well, or a flow thing in what you take visitors through? What makes the space nice? How can you help visitors engage with and enhance their reflection, their sociability, and the storytelling in these spaces? What are some of your examples here? It would be really lovely to hear about any of your experiences in either creating or just experiencing social spaces, spaces for reflections, spaces for engaging in experiences at museum and heritage sites. So please do leave your comments.